In the beginning of my activism journey, I felt rage. And rage is a powerful fuel, but that fuel runs out.
Hi, I'm Rachel Duffell, Regional Content Director of Power and Purpose at Tatler Asia. Welcome to the show. We're delighted to have with us here today Amanda Nguyen. Amanda is a civil rights activist, founder of RISE, a bioastronautics researcher, and earlier this year became the first Vietnamese woman in space. Welcome, Amanda.
Thanks for having me.
So to start off for our audience, can you describe what you do in one sentence?
Yes, I am an astronaut and an activist.
And in brief, what's your why? Why do you do what you do?
My why is really about representation. I want people of all ages, and especially of the communities that I represent, to know that their dreams matter.
And was there a pivotal moment that got you to where you are here today?
Well, certainly fighting for my rights have got me here today, but also having the audacity to dream, to be in spaces where somebody who has not looked like me has been yet, like space.
Like space, yes, because you were the first Vietnamese woman in space earlier this year when you made your space flight. Where did that dream to go to space come from? Did it start very young?
It did, and it started even before I was born. My parents are boat refugees from Vietnam, and they learned celestial navigation in order to find their way to freedom. So that legacy really inspired me to study astrophysics at Harvard and MIT.
Wow. And then where does the activism come from?
Rage. My activism comes from rage. No, it also comes from hope. For me, it was a personal experience, gender-based violence. Unfortunately, so many people experience this, and I'm one of them. I am a survivor of rape, and when I found out that the evidence collected from my assault could be destroyed untested, I was very mad, and I decided to rewrite the law. And so I did, for the United States and then for the United Nations. I did not always have a goal to be an activist. Actually, it was really an identity struggle for me because, of course, talking about sexual assault is still stigmatic. And I realized at one point that I had to fight for my rights, that I would not be able to honestly go to sleep at night if I didn't speak up for my rights. And when I walked into my local area rape crisis center, there weren't enough seats for us in the waiting room. And I had known how, theoretically, the numbers for how many people are affected, 25 million in the United States, 1.3 billion across the world. That number became real to me once I became a survivor. And I made the choice then to pause my astronaut dreams and fight for my rights.
What was your picture of an activist when you sort of thought, this is what I want to do? Did you have any role models?
I'll share with you my greatest role model for activism, and that's Jane Goodall. Jane is such an icon and so kind and also graceful. She is both a scientist and an advocate. And for me, that shows that we can be multitudes. Our humanity is about multitudes. So you can, at one side, be science-oriented, but also advocate for whatever it is you want to advocate for.
I'd like to talk a bit about kind of activism today in this day and age. I think social media plays a big role. What's the role of social media for you, and how do you because it's such a intense, fast-paced world online, but then when you're trying to change laws and write laws, it's not fast.
Social media in today's activism is certainly a double-edged sword. On one hand, it has unlocked gates that have traditionally been used to choose certain voices, which are worthy of telling. And so with social media, anyone from anywhere can have a platform, go viral, touch millions of lives in hours. But on the other hand, of course, algorithms are not neutral. And we have these echo chambers that can perhaps create less of an empathetic world. And so in this day and age, social media is a tool, and like all tools, it's up to how we use it.
And do you find this gives a lot of opportunity for younger people to kind of really make change? And what would you say to them?
Social media undoubtedly has given young people a new tool in order to have their voices heard. And my biggest advice for people who want to speak up is to do so authentically and have a very clear call to action. It's different from doing good and feeling good. And so often we feel pain, we feel these emotions about what we care about. And that's really important because our pain is power. And so when we want to channel that, have a bullseye, help other people to your cause by having a clear call to action.
And what's your call to action?
Well, there's two. My first one is universal jurisdiction for rape survivors. Although I've passed on the United Nations a General Assembly resolution, which outlines the tenet by which countries have a standard of justice for survivors, the next step is access to that justice. Universal jurisdiction refers to the idea that some crimes are so heinous, they can cross borders. And right now in the world, there are some crimes that fall under that. Murder, drugs, trafficking, but sexual violence does not. And simply what we're fighting for is to have it listed under universal jurisdiction. My second is on a personal level, which is that anyone and everyone has a dream. Even if you might not realize it now, when you were a kid, you had a dream. And somehow along the way, challenges got thrown at us and we perhaps had to put aside our dreams for reality. I want people to know that your dreams can come true, because if mine was as wild as going to space, then yours can be achieved too.
You published your memoir earlier this year, Saving Five, a Memoir of Hope. And I think hope is a word that you use a lot. Is it an emotion you feel? Is it a discipline you practice? Tell me more about hope for you.
That's such an insightful question. Hope to me is both an emotion and a muscle to practice. In the beginning of my activism journey, I felt rage. And rage is a powerful fuel, but that fuel runs out. And what's left is hope, a return on investment of the energy that we put in. So for me, hope is about knowing that we have a plan to achieve our dreams. And it's also a daily practice. I call it a glimmer. So glimmers are the opposite of triggers. They're things in your life, small things. It could be like your first sip of coffee in the morning, or the way a leaf is falling in the fall. These things that are intentional, like a gratitude journal, but instead it's noticing the art of appreciating little glimmers in your life, which build hope like a muscle.
Your advocacy, you present with such poise, even glamour. Is that a deliberate choice? Was the sort of role of beauty and joy in a life dedicated to fighting for justice against trauma intentional?
It is intentional, the way that I show up in my activism, which includes beauty, which includes the things that I like authentically, fashion, styling. Joy is the most radical form of rebellion. And what I've heard from survivors is that they really appreciate being able to see that activism and speaking up about healing from something so painful can take different forms. Originally, I did wonder what it was like to be in these hallowed hallways, let's say testifying in front of the United States nation in Congress, or in front of the world at the United Nations. Did I need to look like every other suit that was there? And I realized that actually there's immense power in showing up authentically as ourselves. And so that's why I wear my lipstick, and that's why I have an intention with my fashion and with beauty.
Going back to space, people talk about the overview effect. That's the emotional shift when humans see Earth from space. Did that change your sort of perspective on what you do on the ground?
The overview effect, which describes this, I call it an existential crisis that so many astronauts have, where we leave Earth as technical people but return to Earth as humanitarians, just profoundly moved by the fact that we're all on this spaceship Earth. is an experience that I certainly had. For me, as I mentioned before, my identity as both a public rape survivor advocate and also a scientist and astronaut, I felt like could be a tension at odds. And in fact, one of the things that I struggled to bring with me was my hospital band from the day that I was assaulted. And I had punted that because I didn't know if I wanted to bring this visceral reminder, this literal label of what happened to me on the most consequential day of my career. And when I was in the spaceship, when that 1 minute buzzer went off and we had to get into our seats, I pulled that band out. It was just a gut decision. And in that moment, I showed my survivor self the world that she changed. And for me, what that moment taught me is that we are multitudes. We don't need to compartmentalize who we are, our career versus our trauma. We can live out all of our humanity.
And lastly, what do you think is the secret to your activism? You've created such systemic change without that traditional sense of power, without being in a traditional seat of power. How? And what advice would you have for others to do that?
There's a little secret at Rise for how we've been able to create 114 laws, and it's called radical empathy. The ability to sit in front of someone who may not see the humanity in you, but you try to see the humanity in them. And it's a really tall order to ask of a trauma survivor, perhaps even unfair. But if we are able to practice this radical empathy, climb over these uncomfortable walls, then we'll be able to push the needle forward and negotiate these rights. And it's worked for us every single time. I know that in this very polarized world, especially with social media, that it can seem really difficult to engage in the practice of empathy. But for us, that has been the key to winning every single time.
Wow. Thank you so much, Amanda, for being here with us today and for all your inspirational sharing.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.